Hello everyone and welcome to episode 13 of the Beginner Series. Today I want to talk about what runes should you keep and how to determine if you should keep them. So let's start by talking about the substats a rune can have. As you can see on the screen, I made a graph with every substat a rune can have. What you want to focus on is the max roll of every stat. Now why is that important? Because the best way to determine if a rune is good or not it's by the efficiency that rune has. Now let's get a little more specific about that. Let's take this rune for example. As you can see, it has almost all the stats at the max roll they could have except the 1% we miss on accuracy. Now the only thing that would make this rune start with a higher efficiency, it's if we would also have an innate stat. Now let's talk a bit about innate stats. As you can see, the rune on screen has another stat right under the main stat. That is what an innate stat is. On innate stats, you can't use grinds and also you can't change them with gems. So having a high innate stat makes a great improvement on the rune. Now another important thing you want to have on your runes is having as many percent stats as possible, since those provide the most increase in stats, while flat ones provide less. Now that we have determined how to decide if a rune has a good start, let's focus on the other step besides stats. Before upgrading the rune, you have to think, what would that rune need to roll in order for me to use it? In my case, for this rune, I want to roll as high as possible in HP and defense, while also trying to avoid rolling in both accuracy and resistance. Now, why do you want to avoid one of those? The reason for that is because I want a gem speed on this rune. And if one of the rolls would go in accuracy and one would go into resistance, it would be a wasted roll. Let's power this rune up and see how it goes. Unfortunately, the first roll was a low one, but let's see the next one. Another pretty low roll into defense %T. Now let's see the next one. This time we got a max roll into accuracy. As long as the last roll is not into resistance, it will be nice. A high roll into HP %, I will take it. Now that we have the rune at +12, let's talk a little bit about it. As I said, we want to have as high as possible in terms of stats on every roll for defense percentage. We got 19% that could have been 24%, so we are missing out on 5%. For accuracy, we are missing only on 1%, and on HP %, we are also missing on 1%. That pretty much means this rune turned into a max purple rune. Now what does that mean? It means that if we would have max rolls on a purple rune, which starts with one less roll, we would have the same stats. But having a max rune purple is not bad at all. So this rune turned into a usable rune. Now why is that a nice rune? We get to the next point. As I said, we want to have as many percent stats as possible, especially grindable stats. The only stats that can be grinded are HP %, defense %, attack %, and speed, also flat HP, flat defense, and flat attack. So that means we can increase the HP % and the defense % on this rune with grinds, and that will also be a big increase in stats. Now before I do a few rune crafts to give you some more examples, I want to mention that on every rune you want to have stats that go well together. For example, if a blade has flat def, critical rate, accuracy, and resistance, you don't really want to keep that rune, since blade is a damage-dealing set, so you want to have as many damage-dealing stats as possible, but there are a few exceptions for that if you manage to get, let's say, an endure rune with all damage-dealing stats and high rolls. You can use that as a broken set for one of your damage dealers, so don't sell a rune from the start if the stats don't match the set. Now let's craft a rune and apply what we talked about. So we got a slot 4 rage rune with critical rate as the main stat. So the first thing that came to mind when I saw this rune was that for rage runes, you always run critical damage on slot 4. So that's a minus from the start. After that, I saw that almost all substats are bad, so another minus. But this is not a right-away sell. The reason for that is the speed. We have a high roll into speed, so that means it has potential to be used on our swift units as a broken set. So the only way this rune would turn out decent, it's if we get at least 3 high rolls into speed. Unfortunately, we got only 16 speed, so that rune is not usable, and I decided to sell it. Let's craft another one and see what we get this time. This time we got a slot 2 VO with high substats, so this time we have a rune with good potential. Next, same as on last rune, I thought about what would I want that rune to roll in order for me to use. So the best outcome would of course be all rolls into speed, but as long as we get a few high rolls into speed and defense, it will be okay. Unfortunately, this rune had every roll very close to minimum. Let's break it down. For accuracy, it could have been 16, so we are already missing 4% there. Next on attack, we are missing 6% on speed. We are missing 2, and on defense, we are missing 3%. Taking into consideration the high rolls. This started with, it's pretty much close to the worst outcome we could have had. But this gets us to a very important thing. As I said, this rune didn't turn out too great, but it's not an insta-sell for me. The reason for that is because taking into consideration the stage of the game in which we are, this rune is my best slot, 2, violent with HP percent. So every time you want to make sure to check if that rune is an improvement for your slot. This way, you will be able to have a few runes for you to use in case you want to run a unit. So definitely make sure before selling a rune to check if it's your best in slot. Let's see the next one. Unfortunately, this time we got a slot 6 with flat attack as the main stat. The only time I would power this rune up would be if it had speed. The same as the rage we had before. If we would get a high speed rune, it's very good. Even if we have a flat stat as the main stat. But since we have no speed, it's a sell. Let's see the next one. This time we got a slot 3 Swift rune with a speed substat. For Swift, most of the time, you care only about speed and damage dealing stats, since most of the time your support units will be on violent, so it's not the best start for the rune, but let's see how it powers up. Unfortunately, we only got 1 roll into speed, but as I said, this rune would be an improvement in case I need a tanky Swift rune for slot 3, so I will also keep this rune for now. But also, don't try to get only legendary runes, as you can see. Purple runes can also become good runes. As you can see, this shield rune started as purple, but with some high rolls, it becomes very nice. I hope you found this video helpful, and I managed to cover everything about what you need to know. But if you have any more questions, make sure to leave them in the comments, and I will definitely make sure to answer them. Also, make sure to subscribe if you don't want to miss any future uploads. See you next time. Danti Chin Tico.